Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be with you all here today and to look at on this sea of eager faces who are all part of wanting to be change makers. I'm hoping that today is a day where we want to leave having said some smart things and thought some smart thoughts, but actually more than that, we've actually changed the way that we think, the way that we understand what true circularity can be. So my name is Sian Sutherland. I'm going to see if this clicker is going to work for me. I am co-founder of A Plastic Planet. I am probably the least likely eco-warrior you will ever meet. I'm an entrepreneur, massive plastic sinner. But now I know what I know it is indefensible for us not to try and change. So the first thing that I want to do is really set the scene for you. My job today is to set the scene on why we need to talk about circularity at all, why we need to change. And we all know that this is the case. There are no climate deniers, or maybe the 2% of the population, climate deniers out there. And it's happening so much faster than we ever thought. 2022, last year, 7 once in 1,000 year extreme weather occurrences. Why should we worry about temperature when we sit, certainly us in the UK, thinking, oh, how exciting that we can now actually plant some vines and beat the French, and not just the rugby, but we can make better wine than them. Why should we really worry about these incremental shifts on the dial of temperature? This is why we should worry. 2 billion people are forecast to be on the move. MOD, Ministry of Defence in the UK, actually think that this is underestimated. 2 billion people will be on the move. And why? Because their land is no longer habitable. So what is this going to mean for the global supply chain? The global south, where many of our brands and businesses not only take ingredients from the global south, but it's the new market opportunity for them. So this market will no longer exist. We will see increasing weaponization of food. We've already seen it in Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe. We're going to see that more and more, the weaponization of water because of the scarcity of water. How many of you have been aware of what's happening in Spain? 40-degree heat in early April in Spain. This year we are forecast to produce only 25% of the olive oil that they normally do. So you can see that temperature really matters. And the very infrastructure that we have built cannot cope. So the roads, the railways, they are buckling under the strain of these increased temperatures. And for me this morning, I was out walking along the waterfront, and I was aware that they're doing all this building and creating new parks. And it made me a little sad to think, how long will it be before that new parkland is underwater? So who's going to fix it? Is it governments? Is it the UN? This little graph here shows you, with those black arrows, every single one of the UNGAs, the COPs, all the meetings of the parties, the good guys, the UN, who are elected by us to fix the problems of the world. So those little black arrows, as you can see, absolutely no impact whatsoever. So we live in a world where the future has never been more predictable. We always talk about, oh, well, nobody can really tell. Well, there's an element of risk, but we really don't know what the future holds. We know exactly what the future holds right now. And it's these 3 things. We hope less fossil fuel dependency. We know definitely fewer ecological resources, and we know more climate devastation. So this is the future that we absolutely know. So what you need to be thinking as a business is, how can you afford not to be ready for this very predictable future? So today, what we all want to do is rethink circularity. Some of us may think that Ellen MacArthur Foundation, sorry if you're in the room, invented this new thing called the circular economy. So I would just like to put a little provocation into the room on what circularity actually is. Who in this room has seen this illustration? Great. Can anybody tell me what's wrong with the final picture of the circular economy? I knew he was sitting at the front for a reason. Yes, there's still a bin. So why is there still a bin? This is why there's still a bin. Because what we do as mankind, in our greedy grabbing of natural resources, we take something from nature that is entirely nutrient-based, designed to go back to nature in a healthy, safe way. We take things from nature, and then we do stuff to them. We add chemicals. We fundamentally toxify them. Leather is a brilliant example. What could be more natural and designed to go back to nature as a nutrient for the next stage of growth than skin? But what do we do to it? We take these skins and we tan them and we add chromium and heavy metals and toxic dyes so that it can never go back to nature as a nutrient. Nature is completely binary. What we give to nature is either a nutrient for the next stage of growth, or it is a poison, it is a toxin. There is no gray area. So when we're looking at circularity, when we're looking at materials, we need to remember there is no gray for nature. It is binary. It is a toxin or it's a nutrient. So I'd like to propose a different view of circularity, which is this. Imagine a world where we could take nutrients from nature, we could bake them, mold them, shape them, just as we do with things like plastic, to make things that are useful for us. But then fundamentally, we don't add the toxins, we don't add the poisons. We don't chemically modify them and break the backbone of the constituent parts of those nutrients so that they can go back to nature as nutrients for the next stage of growth. Because there is no waste in nature. Everything is a nutrient for the next stage of growth. And I don't think that you can talk about circularity, particularly in the world of packaging, which is why we're here today, without talking about plastic, the default material for almost everything. Because we believe that plastic is this extraordinary, brilliant opportunity of a gateway to change. There is an intrinsic connection between the climate crisis and the plastic crisis. It really is this canary in the coal mine, this little tap on the shoulder for us to wake us up. But one thing we need to be aware of is it will never be circular. It will never fit into a circular model. We're so used to plastic that it's easy to think it's like, I don't know, cobalt or aluminium or like one of those materials that is on the periodic table. Plastic isn't on the periodic table. Plastic is a mixture of chemicals, and some of them are toxic. 2 weeks ago, I was in Brussels, and it was the first time that we actually brought the health scientists, hosted by the MEPs, with industry, together to talk about the impact on human health of the toxins within plastic. Everything in our world, and particularly when we're talking about circularity, is about chemicals. Sorry, a little slurp from my non-plastic bottle. Shame on plastic bottles outside. We're now making a new chemical every 10 minutes. Only 50% of these chemicals have ever been tested for their impact on human health. Just in the making of plastic, we use 14,000 chemicals. And the scientists in Brussels 2 weeks ago wanted to be very, very clear. We do not need more research. We have thousands of reports that will tell us about the impact of chemicals in plastic on human health. And before we start thinking that you can just recycle our way out of this plastic crisis problem, I just wanted to mention this. Even if recycling rates in the US were more than 5%, in the UK they are less than 10%, even if that were a possibility that we could ramp up the infrastructure of recycling, the main reason why we should never think that recycled plastic is the answer is this. Those chemicals don't disappear. They compound up. And when they compound up, we lose all traceability and accountability of where they are. Some of you may be aware that there is a treaty process, and the negotiating committee will be sitting again next week in Paris. And this is for the UN Global Plastics Treaty. We have this amazing opportunity to create a robust treaty. And one of the things that's on the table, which has never been on the table before, is the impact on human health. And you can see this is something from Systemic and Bain & Co., a little report on the very first negotiating session. And the first thing that was up there as a theme was the human toxicity risk. But I'd like to pose another provocation to you. We'd like to look at this as a gift, that the plastic crisis really is that little tap on the shoulder from Mother Nature to say, hey, you've gone down a toxic cul-de-sac here that you need to come out of fast. And think of it as this defibrillator to wake us all up, to not just swapping material, but to actually think differently about our entire systems. Because if we fix the plastic crisis, we will directly and indirectly fix so much else about the climate crisis, because it will result in not just a material swap, but an entire system change of us living in a very different way. Because the other imperative is the fact that we take too much. We have been so greedy, taking the resources from nature, taking the resources from our children's future, making stuff with it today, and calling it GDP. Earth Overshoot Day gets earlier every single year. I'm sure you're all aware of Earth Overshoot Day, which is the day that we have taken what we are entitled to in that year. So 5th of June is forecast this year, but actually in the US, it's something like the 7th of March. And this fact is so shocking to me. In the last 6 years, we've used more natural resource than in the entire previous century. So I'd love you to think, what is your business, your brand, what does it do? Does it make Earth Overshoot Day a little later this year? Because if it does, you will be a success. And if it doesn't, I can almost guarantee you will become irrelevant and you will be a future dinosaur. And the second question, because of course plastic and carbon are so intrinsically connected, is this whole thing of offsets. Does your business, your project, your brand, whatever you're working on today, does it offset carbon or does it inset carbon? Because the only way that we're going to get out of this mess is by insetting carbon, by genuine reduction. We think our future is inevitable. And we hear this all the time at the moment, actually, when we talk about AI and machine learning. And we think, oh, it's just going to happen. We're going to ruin the education system. We're going to lose control. What's going to happen with money when the machines change the money systems? We think it's just all going to unfurl and we have no control over it. And I'd like us all to remember that we create the future, particularly the kind of people that are in this room today. We have enormous power. Because the world of business has always been and will always be the tool of change. And myself as an entrepreneur, massive plastic sinner, I believe in the power of business, that business can be a tool of change and a tool for good. But we need to go back to basics. You can never retrofit sustainability within a business. You have to completely rethink your systems from the ground up. So what I love is doing workshops with organizations and saying to them, imagine this. Imagine that you didn't have the shackles of your supply chain, that you didn't know all those reasons why not. Imagine if you could just start with a clean piece of paper and build a business for the 21st century. What would it look like? And it's actually a really freeing experience to do that without having to remember all the reasons why not. Because what we need more than ever before is the creative industry. Because I can't think of a single time in human history where a banker or an economist has changed the course of mankind. It's the creatives, it's the mavericks, it's the engineers, it's the inventors. We need the creative industry more than we ever have before. And so for ourselves at A Plastic Planet, having become so acutely aware of this knowledge gap between the creative industry and the plastic-free solutionists, the materials makers, the system changers, that we felt they were very disempowered in this conversation at a time where we need them more than ever. Because we imagined, what would it be like if these 160 million global creatives were empowered, that were connected to those materials and systems changes? Imagine if we could redesign everything from the beginning of the tap so we had no waste at the end. So the last 2 years, we've been working on a project that I just wanted to show you a tiny glimpse of called Plastic Free. So as you can imagine, we believe that the accelerator, the gas pedal, the new gas pedal that we need now is the creative industry, because design really does have the power to change absolutely everything. And let's not be thinking this is something that's going to happen in 10, 15 years' time. This incredible future, these materials, they are available right now. The systems change are available now. We need to make sure our future is happening today. But I worry that we are all just doing this. This is an actual photograph from a golf course in Oregon, posted on Facebook, and the subline said, "Our members always love to finish their round." But really, is this what we're all doing? Are we all guilty of this? Just doggy paddling in the slipstream of status quo, waiting for somebody to invent something, for it not to be our responsibility? We've got to move fast now. We've got to move from think tanks, no more McKinseys. We've got to move from think tanks to action tanks, because we have a massive imperative, and you guys have the power. So what I implore all of you is use today as a tipping point for yourselves, to rethink everything, to really grab hold of all the power that you have and use it in a very different way. Because what we do in the next 7 years does not just impact us. It doesn't just impact your kids or even your kids' kids. What we do right now, unlike any other generation that preceded us, is going to impact that massive blue circle of the unborn generations to come. A radical rethink is all that is going to get us there. So my final provocation to you is this: are you in? Are you really in? Are you genuinely, with all of your heart and mind, going to be in this room and think differently and make change happen? Thank you.